Hi, hi, hi. All right, you guys. So, next in our series is the power of forgiveness, lesson 3 in the way of the heart in our self study group. And I have a few key points. I took some notes and everything for this lecture. And first and foremost, let's get into the meat and bones of this. What is forgiveness? What is it really? So, forgiveness actually is the choosing of releasing of our projection onto another human being. It is the act of forgiveness of one's own projections of the self. So to forgive would be to forgive oneself for the projections that we have placed outside of us. Okay? More importantly, the more often we choose to forgive, the more enmeshed we become with the purity of our consciousness, the beauty of our consciousness. What we must do is we must become aware of how we have colored in and affected all our relationships based on the wounds that we're projecting outwardly. The more we become aware of these things, the more we realize how essential forgiveness is, not only to our well-being, but to the well-being of everything that we're seeing around us. It's essential because on this spiritual path that we're all walking together hand in hand, right? There is going to be a point in which we're going to recognize both our need for deep forgiveness, our need to extend forgiveness, and our need to heal and recuperate from when we have been faced with judgment, right? We're going to be always on the receiving end of our own actions. So there are going to be times where we don't even realize that we've judged another, and this is what we're becoming aware of. So when these poisons come, how are we going to choose to react? What are we going to do? There is a saying in our world that says, it takes one to know one. Now, if you know about my teachings and you know about conscious mirrors, then you know that there is nothing that is occurring outside of us that is not within us already. That's a fact, right? And so if that's the case, then how are we choosing to react to this? How are we choosing to own this? There are a few key points in this lecture, in this study. First and foremost, forgiveness is a bridge to our brothers and sister souls. Okay? Now, that is because whatever we recognize in another is actually a recognition of our own guilt. So if we're going to really truly forgive, we're forgiving both ourselves and our brother and sister, and what we're doing is expanding the light of our awareness. The next key point in this talk is the veil of projection. Let's talk about that. Let's really get into the nitty-gritty of this. The veil of projection is what in our Conscious Mirror series is what I called the mirror of judgment. That which we have deemed unworthy of ourselves, that which we deem not good, that which we deem not like us. It is what we deny. Because the truth is, nothing occurs outside of us that is not occurring inside of us. So to deny that is to deny the truth of your creative experience. Right? So what happens is when we deny it, so we've blocked the light and said, that's not us. Literally, we project that onto another human being, and that other human being now plays the role that we are refusing to accept about ourselves. That's the veil of projection. It is the denial of truth. And many of us don't know that that's what we're seeing outside when we choose to deny that what we're seeing is us. If we're all one, that means we're all one all the time. Good or perceived good or bad, it is always us. And therefore, the sooner we own it, the sooner we see. Okay? Now, it usually can be spotted because we feel justified in our anger. No matter what the circumstances is, we're going to feel justified in that anger. But awakening requires vigilance. Okay? It means becoming aware of our thoughts. It means becoming aware of the fact that everything that we think, say, and do is what we're experiencing outside. The world is created by the choices we've made and the effects that we have on the world the thoughts that we've had in our mind, and that's what we're seeing out there. Okay, so we must own that. We must choose to observe these thoughts and consider, when have we been in judgment? When have we considered something unforgivable? What is it? Cultivate and practice that forgiveness. Consider it a chance to love. We are always going to be presented with opportunities to not love, to be disturbed, to consider it an offense. And every single time, consider it an opportunity to love. Okay? How we choose to respond and react literally means, if you think about it, the word react literally means to act again. That's what it means. So how are we going to choose? If you think about this, our wounds, when they're not healed, these triggers, right? They become repetitive. Everything happens in cycles, in circles, in time, and you will notice whether it's choosing the wrong guy over and over again, you will eventually notice that you can't keep blaming the guys. There's only one common denominator, the person choosing the wrong guy over and over again, right? So you have to take ownership of that. Or if there's some kind of wound that replays and replays, like I've used in my conscious mirror exercises, and I've said, here, there was a wound in me that felt that I was discriminated against. And so it repeated my whole life until I healed it. These are opportunities because these things are cyclical. So we have to remember that when these things are occurring, they're a cry for help for our own healing. Not them out there, our own. That's what we're focused on. Now, let's talk about how forgiveness actually heals, because I don't think a lot of people have considered how this works. Like, how does forgiving them help me, right? Everybody wants to understand that? Well, let's talk about that. If forgiveness and judgment are one and the same spectrum, one being lack thereof of the other, then judgment would be that which we consider not forgivable, that which we consider to be painful, whatever, unworthy of us. As soon as we do that, we contract the light that is emitting from our heart so that we can make a shadow image of another body and allow them to play that role so that it is not us. Interesting. Okay. However, when we choose to forgive, we are getting in alignment with how God's mind, how Christ's mind actually works. I learned this from Ho'oponopono. What are our 4 axioms in Ho'oponopono? I love you. Please forgive me. I am sorry. You get where I'm going with this? Forgiveness and healing and love are all tied together. To be like the Christ mind, to wipe our projection out would be to include this feeling. So forgiveness then, what it does is instead of creating a shadow to attack your neighbor, it expands your light and then allows you to see your brother and sister as they are. Not as you've been wounded, not as you're projecting, but as they are. So it allows us to heal both what we see out there and ourselves at the same time. That which we don't will repeat. So it's an act of freeing ourselves. It is a very important part of our process here. Now, what we must remember is whatever we hold on to leads to disease. In fact, cancer is nothing more than a lot of resentment pent up. That which hasn't let go then turns into, why? Because you've contracted the light. You've blocked the light. When you block the light, oxygen doesn't flow to these cells. These cells then start to contract, and then they start to putrefy, and then they turn into cancer. They turn into other illnesses. So when we say forgiveness is for you, it is. Never mind what's going out there. It is for you. It is for your well-being. It is very important. Okay? Now, last but not least, in this lecture, I want to cover one more point. Reactivity indicates the need for you to heal yourself. That's really important. If we are reacting, we are not healed. So it's really important to really take into account, really notice when your buttons are pushed and ask yourself, is there another way to view this? rather than holding on to these things, is there a better way to view this? Okay? Remember that whatever we are choosing to not forgive will increase the tension and create a disturbance. And whatever we choose to forgive and act in love increases the light and allows us to see things as they are. If you remember correctly, as part of this journey, one of the problems that I mentioned was my issues with my mother. For the longest time, I couldn't forgive her. I felt that her depression had ruined my childhood. I was angry. I couldn't let that go, right? And for the longest time, the angel said, forgive her, forgive her, forgive her. And I wouldn't until I became my mother, until I lost my son, until I did the same thing to my daughter that my mother did to me, until I repeated the cycle, could I finally see how and why, by not forgiving, I held myself hostage to a situation. And what I want us to understand is that was probably one of my biggest things, because I didn't really have that many enemies, that kind of thing. But that was one of my biggest issues that I couldn't let go. And in essence, what I did was block my own health, block my own wealth, block my own connection to other people. I was always going to be projecting that wound until I cleared it out of my awareness. And the reason that I say that that was so important is because there is a world that we can see with our eyes, okay? When you clear the light and when you give that clear channel, there is a world that exists between time and space. You literally see underneath the fabric of time and space, and you see light. You see light everywhere. It becomes so powerful, it emits from your heart, and you can visibly see it around you. You can see every human being as light. This is what we're after. And so forgiveness is probably one of the most, if not the most, essential aspect of this part of the study. That's why I want to include this. This is why I want to say this. It's like, if you remember the truth that there's nothing in our experience that hasn't come from us, then everything is worthy of forgiveness, since everything is us. We have to practice forgiveness like we practice breathing. And remember that when we choose to forgive, we are forgiving the Christ in everyone. Or we hold the Christ hostage. Which one are we going to choose? If we're going to walk this path together, then we're going to walk this path of forgiveness and make a vigilant choice to expand the light in our heart, to be able to see it visibly everywhere, to see that world of light, to see it emitting from our hands, to see it emitting from our heart, to see it emitting from our, to see it with our eyes, so that you guys can see what I can see, which is heaven on earth. Everyone deserves that. That is what we're after. And the sooner we let go of these reactive stances, the better, the quicker we get in alignment with what actually is, and not as we've been projecting them to be. We are on a mission here to solve the puzzle of ourselves. That's really what this is about. This whole study is about ourselves. How are we going to solve this puzzle? How are we going to choose to forgive the Christ within us? How are we going to choose to forgive our offenses? What are we going to choose to see? Are we going to choose to see with Christ's eyes or with our eyes of judgment? Are we going to eat the apple or not? That's where we're coming from, you guys. So I gave this story kind of as a, I'm not immune to my own wounds. But sooner or later, if I don't choose to let go, I'm only hurting myself. I'm not choosing to heal. So I will include this lecture at the bottom of our series. I included an exercise to help us really get present and practice compassion and forgiveness. I'm also going to include a little story, a childhood story called The Littlest Soul. It's just a little reminder of how we practice forgiveness and how we expand. They say that there was a Roman soldier when supposedly Jesus was being crucified, whom Jesus just looked at him Okay? Just looked at him. And the guy could not pound the nail into his wrist. He dropped the mallet and walked away. That man has transcended this world and appears as an ascended master to a lot of people now. It was that choice in what appeared to be the deepest, most active, unforgivable, murderous thoughts that affected that man for all of eternity. We don't realize how important the choice to forgive is until we're on the other side sometimes. Till we can see how everything is existing at once, how we're affecting the world, how beautiful it can be when we're in the right frame of mind, when we're in alignment. So today, you guys, I really want us to take this week to consider forgiveness of things. Consider forgiveness of everything. Realize that nothing occurred outside. We are not denying the truth. If we are made as creators, then as creators, there is nothing that we have not chosen for our experience. How are we going to choose to evolve? How are we going to choose to evolve our brothers and sisters? So that's lesson 3, you guys. I'll include the full lecture. I'm going to include the Littlest Soul. Check them out. And by all means, I want to thank you. I want to thank you so much for sharing your stories and for joining us during these exercises. Like I said, there's 12 of them. Let's see how far we can get into these first 12 and see if you guys enjoy this series. And then we'll continue on this journey. I also, like I said, I have a Mirror Work Quantum Success new workshop that I want to do. So there's a lot going on. We have a lot of changes, but they're all good. They're all good. So thank you so much for joining us, and really think about forgiveness. Understand how vital it is. I knew that when the last puzzle piece, that which I refused to forgive, I forgave, I saw a different world. A wholly different world. A world unlike anything I've ever known, except in death. And I realized in that moment that I did not have to die to get to the other side, that it existed now. But it depended on my willingness to self-heal, on my willingness to forgive offenses, on my willingness to consider offenses not to be real. So I hope you all consider this just as important for you, because I promise you there is a world of light, there is a world of beauty existing underneath the surface of our projections that we all deserve to see. It's not just seen with this eye, it's seen with these two. It's quite beautiful. With these two eyes, you can see that nothing has ever died, that everything still exists in perfect harmony, that there's beauty and light in everything. Kind of like the Celestine prophecy when they practice the exercises and suddenly you could see the light. That's what we're after. We can all get here. So consider forgiveness part like 3/4 of the grade. And try it out, you guys. Mwah! I love you. Thank you so much for joining. And let's continue our series. Let's stick with forgiveness. This is our modus operandi, number 1, most important one. Love you. Bye-bye.